I'd love to hear what brings you here.
An invitation to each person to say, yeah, what brings you, who you are. And Geoff and I will say that too in a bit. But
oh, well, I'll go first. I hate these things. Well, actually, it's you two that have brought me here because, Geoff, we were at, was it Birmingham?
Liverpool, I
You
think.
were back at Birmingham.
no, it was Birmingham.
No, it was
was
Birmingham.
it? Was it?
We were talking about a retreat you were going to do, which, you know, I'd still like to do.
Yeah, so would we.
Yeah, when this is all finished. So I've kind of come for a bit of you two, really, to hold me until the retreat can happen.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much. I do remember having a really lovely connection with you that conference. Even though I don't remember where it was probably a corporate place. So you can be forgiven, can't you, for not remembering which town it was in.
Yeah.
But yeah. Lovely.
Kathy, do you want to say a bit about your connection with TA? Because some of us know a bit about who you are, but some may not know you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a TSTA and I live up near Liverpool now. And I do supervision training and research. I like research. So I've just done a recent project which has been exploring parents and siblings who've lost a child, stroke sibling. So that's my immediate passion at the moment.
Thanks, Kathy.
I'll follow Kathy, because I come here because of you two too. and indeed the topic, you know, physis, intuition and autonomy, and is something that is close to my heart. And I love your thoughtfulness, your spirituality, your connectedness with the divine, with what the spiritual, with the sense, the essence of self and of the world. And I always feel nourished after your workshops.
Oh wow!
So I've come for more of that nourishment, and also to be with you guys because I love you very much. And yeah, that's why I'm here. There's no choice for me. As soon as I saw your names, I thought, yeah, I know where I'm going today.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Did I miss you? I mean, God, you know, Geoff and I, we go particularly, I mean, we go back such a long time, don't we? Such a long way.
And, you know, I was thinking this morning, Adrienne, I was reflecting on moments of grace, moments of serendipity that shape your life. And one of those was I asked you to endorse me for a teach for the PTSTA, and I did it terribly. And you said, I'm going to trust you. And I never forgot it.
Really?
Yeah, it was just such an important moment that you trusted me enough. I did a terrible job. So, yeah, I was just reflecting on those wonderful moments that sort of shift us, you know, that nudge us. I think that's, to me, it's about these little nudges that...
Yeah. I should tell you something I remember about you, which is a bizarre story. And I don't know why I keep remembering it. It must be significant. And that is, you were once at one of my tax groups and your foot was hurting you enormously.
Yeah.
You remember it?
Yeah.
Your foot was hurting. You were in such pain. And we thought perhaps you'd broken your foot or something.
Yeah.
And you had these new boots on.
Yeah.
And we debated about whether we should pull the boots off or whether if we pulled the boots off, it might do any damage, more damage to your foot. And I think you kept the boots on. And then I think we later found out it was the boots themselves that were causing the pain. And it's like, I don't know why, but I've always thought to myself, Adrienne, that was such a mistake. You should have helped him get the boot off, not kept it on. Now, I don't know what that's.
Well, there's a long story in that. There's a long story in that, but I think it's probably not the time for me to go into it.
Oh,
But,
right. Okay. But
I may refer to it later.
But I trust that what comes to our mind is somehow relevant in some.
Yeah.
Well,
it is relevant, which is why I'm saying it might come up later. But thank you for that.
But because I don't know why I thought of it, but that's what came to my mind.
Yeah.
And I've had so many good memories with you, so that's a funny one to come up, isn't it? Anyway, everybody, I'm glad to be with you, and I'm Adrienne Lee, and I'm director of the Burn Institute, and I'm a TSTA, and that's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adrienne.
Hi everyone, I'm a newbie, so
Hi,
I just got this lovely vision and you in a pair of posy boots. So how many times have I done that with shoes showing off and they hurt? But I'm here because of the word intuition. I am obsessed by intuition, I suppose. I love it, and I've obviously done a lot of peer group with Jane, who has been my mentor really at the Metanoia. I'm now at TA East. And you don't mind me sharing about our dyslexia and all this, and Heather put us together with the dyslexia situation. She's been a great help, and Geoff has been teaching at the TA, so I just thought two people that I kind of respect. I wanted to see how they work together. And Adrienne, I love the drowning person drawing. That's the only one that I can actually remember. I can't bear all the circles and all these things, and I just love that drawing. So yeah, so that's me. So I'm just a third year and confused person, and it's nice to meet you all.
Welcome, Karina.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I'll go next if I may. My name's Zara, and I'm a second year, and I'm training at the Red Kite in Liverpool, and I'm having a wonderful time doing that. And this is my second time working and learning from Geoff and Jane, and I don't know, they're like trees. You remind me of these kind of wild, wonderful, wise trees that I just do a lot of walking, and I just kind of instinctively want to go to and be with for a while. And it's always a privilege to be around trees that have that kind of lovely openness and sense of growth and expanse. So that's that. And intuition, well, I'm just so in awe of Eric Burns' kind of exploration into intuition, and that very practical clinical application that continue to kind of fold into his theories and bring me to where I am. So yeah, I'm very interested in how you both explore and kind of share theories, but in a very approachable, practical way. So yeah, it's a real privilege to be here and meet some new wonderful people. And Adrienne, I was in a workshop with you yesterday, and my heart was beating because, of course, I know your work so well. And it's lovely to be with you too.
Lovely to see you again.
Okay, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zara.
Need to unmute, Liz.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, start that one again, shall I? I'm happy to go next. I'm Liz. I've moved around a bit. I've started at Wilden, then went to the Link, where I had the pleasure of having Geoff just for one session, and then I am now at Connexus. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that Joe, I consider Joe part of my, he's a TA sibling in my TA family, because we've trained together at the Link, and yeah, so I'm really pleased to see Joe here, as I am pleased to see all of you. Why am I here? Well, I think the title grabbed me, to be honest. It's got a little bit of everything in there that appeals to me. So when I saw the list of opportunities, this was the one for me. I guess I'm really interested in that space where the theory ends and the work you're doing begins, really. I think there is that space, there needs to be faith. I'm not necessarily speaking in a religious sense, but faith in the process, faith in yourself, faith in the other. And I think that space occupies intuition, physis, all of those things that are there that we can't necessarily describe so easily. So I'm really looking forward to it. So I haven't met Jane before, so I'm excited to work with you. And yeah, I really enjoyed some of the CPD that I've done with Geoff, as well as having you as a guest tutor at the link. So I'm, yeah, really pleased to be here today.
Thank you.
To see people I've not met before.
Thanks, Liz.
I shall hop in then. We'll keep Link Centre in the house. So I'm in my 4th year at the Link Centre. So heading steadily towards CTA, which is quite a journey, as many of you will have already taken, and I don't know if you'll have, but yeah, it's yeah, that's my journey at the moment, and I'm looking down that road and enjoying the passage and enjoying the study and the interaction with my fellows. So I'm here because, again, I saw it and I thought, yes, that one. I find that there is a space that isn't readily covered by written theory. We have the text around, psychological transactions from Byrne, and we have all sorts of work on transference. And for me, they are part of intuition. It's that kind of mechanisms where we sense what's going on with other people. And I'm 51, and I spent quite a lot of my time of my life being in technical situations. I was an engineer, I've been an ops manager, and such things weren't in my awareness. I mean, I was doing them, but they weren't in my awareness. And so this is, in some ways, I'm quite new to this. And in others, I'm like, oh, it's all that stuff. Yeah, okay, that's what that is. So it's a wonderful journey to be on. And I have a rule to not really mention other people's checking things, but Zara, I hear you about trees. Yeah, trees are the bomb. I'm really looking forward to today, and I think I should have had a bit more breakfast. I'm feeling a bit peckish, but I've got my tea. It's jasmine tea, if you're wondering.
I wondered if it was lager, actually,
no,
Joe.
Not this time. Not this time of the day. It's not. No bubbles.
I was relieved.
No bubbles. It's not like it's yeah, cider, obviously. Yeah, with one that's drinking whiskey in the past. Yeah, it's jasmine tea. So I'll be sipping on that, and I'm really looking forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol. Okay, to go next. Really looking forward to this morning. 3 of my favourite aspects of work, and I'm really looking forward to the spiritual aspect of this morning. I'm a CTA and psychotherapy. I did my CTA 2 years ago, the last physical conference. So, and I am a postgraduate researcher at the University of Salford, licence, and my area of research is looking at how and when psychotherapists use outcome measures in their work with clients. So yes, I've just embarked on that journey. As Karina was saying, really fascinated by Byrne's work, particularly on intuition, and really looking forward to finding out more about these 3 aspects, as I say, of spirituality. And maybe these are I think the spiritual aspects of my work may be an area that I need to focus on, which is why I'm here.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm a second year student with TA East. And what's drawn me here is more that I've heard you speak before, Geoff. And there's just something about the rhythm and the pace that is quite nurturing. And I think maybe I've brought myself here because I feel some of that nurturing and just trusting that something, I'm here for a reason, trusting that the subject will just bring something up for me today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Shall we say a bit?
Yeah. Do you want to go? Yeah.
Sure. So anyway, I'm Geoff. I've started training in 1990 now, which is a long time ago. So I've had a private practice. I've worked in a prison. I now have a big supervision practice. I've done lots of different things in my wonderful life as a psychotherapist. It's been such a privilege. You know, it's been such a privilege. And but the last couple of years, I've been doing a ministry training with an organization called One Spirit. I went on a retreat about 3 years ago with the founder of One Spirit, who's no longer there. And so I've been doing this ministry training, and I looked at the content of it and I thought that really appeals to me. And it was all about exploring the different faith paths, you know, and looking at ancient and modern wisdoms, really, because I think there is so much in the ancient wisdoms that that are just so profound, and I can't believe how much is out there, really. And then I started to think about some of the things that were within transactional analysis. So my first kind of learning project for the first year I did was to bring a spiritual dimension to my work. And that was the first sort of goal I had as part of my training, which I'm very delighted to say I'm now doing. And part of that was to sort of look back at some of the concepts that I was taught, you know, 30 years ago, and to think about them from the heart rather than from the head. And it was very serendipitous that I met Jane. We passed each other, and kind of there was a knowing then that we would, I don't know whether we knew what we would end up doing, but there was something really wonderful about that moment. And we had a little joke about psychotherapists and vicars. I remember that in the doorway at Starbucks. And you know, anyway. And here we are. So here we are, that this is the outcome of me doing that work, Jane doing her work, and us forming some kind of relationship where we could sort of work together on the spiritual dimension. There is a huge kind of area of work, I think, in spirituality, or the crossover between psychotherapy and spirituality, which is so exciting. And it feels to me like the theme of the conference is kind of really touching on that. I don't know whether you believe that, Jane, but this kind of move in our consciousness towards looking out rather than sort of looking in at ourselves, our egocentric selves, or the tribe that we're part of, and then sort of like we now need to be kind of facing the world, don't we? It's like it's imperative that we do that. So it's such a great privilege to be able to just nudge people, because we all know, you see. I mean, this is not something that we're here to teach. It's something that we all inherently know, I think. You talked about education as drawing people out rather than stuffing people with information. And that's what I think we're about, really, drawing people out. So people already know this stuff, really.
Yeah.
I think. Do you want to carry on?
And I'm Jane. And I, in the last couple of years, have enjoyed a fruitful and rich conversation with Geoff around the interplay between psychotherapy and spirituality, and where Geoff, for 30 years in TA, but for 50 years in mental health, has foregrounded mental health and psychotherapy and has had spirituality and spiritual questions rumbling around in the background. I'm almost the mirror opposite, in that for the last 30 years, I've had spiritual practice and spiritual inquiry in the foreground and psychotherapy rumbling around in the background. So I first went into therapy in my late 20s, and thought about training as a therapist then, and actually ended up at theological college training for ordination in the Church of England, and was among the first women to be ordained priest in 1994 in the Church of England. So I've got that's my kind of stamping ground. And when we look back hundreds of years, in some ways within communities, priests were sometimes effectively the therapist for a community, or they could be, not always, but they could be. So that's always been a part of my self-understanding in a way. And so vocationally, it feels like the two parts of me are not two parts, they're one part. And my sense as I converse with Geoff is that's also true for him too. We've just had different things at the front and the back. Does that ring true for you, Geoff? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm in my 5th year of training at Metanoia, and it was the Starbucks in Ealing where we had the conversation. I remember you saying to me, Geoff, I hope your training isn't making you lose your faith, or it was something like that. It was and it led to this very sparky exchange about somebody mentioned faith earlier, having faith in the process. And I think Liz talked about when the theory stops and the process begins, or I can't remember. But there is something about that that is part of what we explore in this workshop, I think. And it's so good to do it with a small group of people. We've had these, I mean, I feel quite ambivalent about looking at you all on a screen. I'd so much rather be breathing the same air as you. And yet the screen has allowed all these bits of connection. So there's a real ambivalence. I regularly get sidetracked. As Karina mentioned earlier, we connected because Heather Fowley at Metanoia said to Karina when she joined the first year, oh, you might want to talk to Jane, because we have similar patternings around dyslexia and ADHD. So it's been a really rich conversation. I've really enjoyed my learning from Karina, and yeah, so I may get sidetracked, and it's part of the joy of my difference, how I work. Welcome Denise, who's just coming in, and I'm just trying to think what else do I want to say? Oh, I know, as if I could forget. In 4 weeks' time, all being well, trusting the process, I may be a CTA, because I have my Viva, my oral exam,
Wow,
coming up.
good luck. I'm sure you'll be fine.
And,
you'll be fine.
It's a weird experience. I won't
No,
act it out too much here. I've got other places where I can go and act out around that. So behind me, there's a painting by someone I know, who's actually the Reverend Mother of an Anglican convent in South Wales, a woman called Catherine Hall. That painting, there's something about, my hope for this workshop is that we hold a container, a bit like a crucible, within which things can happen as we encounter one another. Psyche, psychotherapy. I think we're all TA psychotherapy people. We're not education organisational. I think everyone's introduced themselves in ways that suggest that we're all therapists. So psychotherapy is soul therapy. It's not mind therapy. We sometimes think it's mind therapy. Soul therapy. So we're here as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 beautiful, unique, complex, interconnecting souls. So welcome.
That's it, isn't it? It's that miracle of being utterly unique and totally connected. Well, we don't feel totally connected, but we are actually. And it's this theme of interconnectivity, I think, which is absolutely, it seems to me to be so widespread in all of the faith paths, really. Interconnectivity, and it's just obvious. And I guess that when we come into the world, I know we do bring transgenerational trauma, and some people, I'm not particularly one of them, thinks we bring with past life trauma as well, and transgenerational trauma before we even arrive. But I know Klein said that the first real trauma is birth, because that's when separation anxiety really starts, that we are totally sort of dependent, and then we enter into the separation of being born. And I was just saying to Jane before we started, look at the ego state model. The second order structural ego state model is absolutely riven with separations, all these circles. And of course, what we want to do is kind of find unity and harmony. But, these separations that we are inevitably have foisted on us is part of the human condition. And I think probably we're here to reconnect with ourselves and with each other. And that's the journey. To me, that's the journey. So
reconnecting with ourselves, with each other, and with the rest of nature.
Yes, oh, for sure.
And it's interesting as you speak, Geoff, because as you speak, it makes me think about the connection that we've spoken about before now between the kind of autonomy, the focus on self, that auto is self. And then I know Adrienne's been someone who's introduced an emphasis more on homonymy, and those who were at the plenary yesterday, Hayley was talking about homonymy and that sense of we all belong to one another, we are connected, we are nature altogether. That's my understanding of some of the emphasis of homonymy. And I asked a question which backfired a bit because we couldn't ask the question in person, it was in the chat, but something about where's heteronomy in there as well? So if autonomy means auto is self, homos is same, homos is the root word in homonymy, and then heteros is other, because although we are interconnected, there's a profound patterning of difference and otherness. And how do we manage otherness and difference alongside managing our connectivity with one another and our sameness? We are, as we breathe, as we exist, as we are same, we are connected. And we bring different stories, different contexts, different backgrounds, different futures, different pasts, different nows. There's a multiplicity of difference, heterogeneity, heteronomy. Heteronomy, that's how people use it, heteronomy. And the nomos part of the Greek, I love words, I absolutely love words. And as did Eric Byrne. I mean, one of my passions about Eric Byrne is that he loved the Greek dictionary. I happen to have it here because I was looking something up after Robin Hobbs's workshop yesterday. So this Greek dictionary, Liddell and Scott, Eric Byrne refers to it in his writings a number of times. Anyway, so I'll come back to that in a bit probably. But homos, so we've got auto, homos and hetero. But the nomos part means, how do we regulate? What are the customs? What are the customs and laws and regulatory principles that govern self, sameness, and otherness? So, I mean, I just think that's a fascinating inquiry. And I've kind of slightly jumped over to autonomy, but it relates to that interconnectedness that you were talking about, Geoff, because yes, we're interconnected. Yes, there's a deep recognition. I see you, you see me. We are the same and we're different.
And that makes me think of like a huge mosaic of creativity, really, in the best sense. We could be completely unique and loving our connections with each other rather than have to feel separated from each other by all manner of things.
And just talking about being separated, I noticed Denise is down there without a video and with her microphone turned off. Denise, do you want to say hello? Are you there?
I am here. I didn't want to interrupt because I've been having trouble getting on this morning, so I just didn't want to interrupt.
You're very welcome. It's very good to have you here. Have you got problems with your video connecting?
I'm going to try it now because I have had...
Jane, if you put your volume up a bit.
Put my volume up a bit.
Could you just...
Am I a bit quiet?
You are a bit.
Ooh, let me just check. Check how I do that. Audio settings. Let's just check my input level. Here we go. Turn up my input level and see if that helps. Does that help at all?
It's better.
Yeah, jolly good. Great.
Yeah.
Denise, one of the things you might find helps, and I mentioned this to Debbie earlier, if you close the reattendance page on your laptop or PC, the conference page, if you close that, then your camera might become available for Zoom, because it didn't seem to be able to do both. Try it and see, because we'd like to see you if we can.
Yeah, I'm just doing that again now. I've just been speaking to Susan to get me on, so I did, you know, redo it, so I forgot to undo it, so I'm just going back to do that now. Sorry.
No worry, take your time, but it's worth closing reattendance, and even if you have to go out and come back in again, then you might find that the camera works, so you're very welcome.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm feeling urged for the PowerPoint now.
Are you?
I think we could just go all over the place with all this stuff because it's so vast.
It's vast.
It's so vast.
Because I was working on the PowerPoint at some ungodly hour, I happen to know that it's let's all say hello to each other and then an invitation to meditate with a bit of a body meditation. The text is on the PowerPoint. Would you like me to bring it up and then you could lead us in a meditation, Geoff?
You want me to, if the text is on there, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if I can run the tech.
Okay.
This is not my favorite thing.
Because one of the things that my learning for this year is to really love my body. Like my last year was about bringing spirituality into my work, and this year it's been about loving the body. And this is such a major challenge. So I'm a bit obsessed with the body now. Not I hope not in a narcissistic way, but I think people come to therapy to love themselves. I think that is what really it's all about. And there are loads and loads of reasons why we can't. And one of the things that we often struggle to do is to really take loving care of our bodies. And I don't mean like going on a diet or exercising or beating ourselves up for what we're not doing, but there is something about the mindfulness of the body, being mindful about our bodies and loving our bodies very deeply. And so yeah, we sometimes do this little body meditation just as a way of arriving. So I'll read it to you. You can close your eyes if you wish, or you can focus on your body or focus on anything you wish, but I'm just going to read it to you. Okay. So it starts like this. Connect with your body in whatever ways are most prominent in this moment, and insofar as you're able right now. Can you feel your body right now? From the top of your head to the tips of your toes. I mean, really feel the body. Are you thinking about your body, or are you sensing your body? Our bodies are absolute miracles, extraordinary. And how do you know whether you're sensing or thinking about it? It's like, can you feel your pulse? Can you feel that life force in your own body. We talk about physis, the life force. Can you connect to that in your own body? Can you feel it in your hands, or in your chest, or in your abdomen, in your toes? Are you in touch with sensations yourself? Where are they and how do they feel? Are you vibrating? Are you pulsing? Are you tingling? So right now, even for a few moments, close your eyes and have a sense of your own body. I'm just going to switch this. No need to grasp or reject anything, just sensing, feeling your feet on the floor, your bottom on the seat. Can you sense the contact? Can you sense the pressure? We are being held right now, very profoundly. We're being held by the earth. We're being held by our chairs, by the floor. And now what of the breath? Can you sense the breath? Where do you sense the breath? In the nostrils? The belly? Do you feel the sensations of breathing? Air flowing in and out of the nostrils? The belly rising and falling? Is the breath cool or warm, smooth or rough, long or short? Change nothing, but simply rest in the breath. This extraordinary thing, the breath. And stay with this just for a moment. Try it right now. And notice, how does this reflection, this connection with the body make you feel overall? This precious gift that we've been given. Miraculous. And this is presence.
Thank you, Geoff. And there's no right or wrong in response to that. There's a kind of benign curiosity about what that did for me, for you, for us. Thank you. So from this place of being here in our bodies, on our screens, we turn to the topic of physis and a quotation from Eric Burns' early work, 1957, A Layman's Guide to Psychiatry and Psychoanalysis. He calls physis the growth force of nature which makes organisms evolve into higher forms. Embryos develop into adults, sick people get better, and healthy people strive to attain their ideals. And Patricia Clarkson points out that Byrne writes about physis in 1947. 47, she says 57, I've got anyway. I don't do detail. I'll check that out later. And he writes about it in What You Say After You Say Hello, that posthumously published book. So just an enduring concept and taken from the Greek. I've shown off and written the Greek up there just because. So Geoff and I were talking about physis in spiritual traditions, and we were looking at contemporary and ancient wisdom traditions of ways of describing the life force, often linking it to breath. So ruach in Hebrew, pneuma in Greek, the chi of the Tao. Christians talk about the Holy Spirit. Sanskrit prana, And then within psychological discourses, is it perhaps the life force that gets described sometimes as eros, libido, the actualizing tendency, the self-actualizing, individuation process? You know, there's various ways of talking about that, having faith in that process of growth and development. Many of us within TA will be familiar with the idea of a kind of downward pressure of script and an upward pressure of, or an upward liberating energy of physis. And some people draw that physis arrow starting below the child ego state, but that sense of there being something which can set us free. And for various reasons, which I may or may not go into as we get into more conversation, but I think I was thinking about that upward thrust and thinking, it reminded me of this drawing. I did a kind of doodling when I'd had a couple of years in therapy, and it came out like this. I think that's a kind of depiction of that physis. You know, it's growing in space, it's bursting through. But there's something missing there, as was pointed out by a later therapist to me. There's no mess there. So if you've ever been at a birth, there's a lot of mess. Or even if you look a little scrabbly chick hatching, it's messy. There are no roots if that's a bulb with the breaking through. That where's it gone? So some later time in therapy, I was thinking about what might it mean to have a deeper taproot, you know, a bit like digging up a dandelion. And within my Christian tradition and the wisdom traditions in which I've been nourished, there's a phrase, being rooted and grounded in love. But I was really struck at how that bit under the ground is dirty, dark, messy, essential if the growth above the ground is going to happen. So I wondered, I haven't diagrammed it yet, but I wondered about a kind of TA style diagram, not just with the kind of arrow of aspiration going up, but also in a non-dual way, an arrow of equal force going down, that as we grow up, we grow down. We're prepared to inhabit and investigate around the shadow and the dark and the dirty, the deeper, more hidden parts, the mess. So that's something about that kind of double-edged physis, up and down. And yeah, we'll give you some time in a minute to come back, either in small groups or with us in the big group, just thinking about whether that resonates, but something about the double energy, not privileging one over the other, but a both and, not either or, but a both and. And I came across recently this lovely drawing, which was called an archaeological drawing of a brassica plant. And of course, we eat the bit at the top, the sort of broccoli, cabbage type, brassica type things. But what do we pay attention to? Where do we normally look? And yeah, I just think that for me is an image of physis. Geoff, do you want to say anything about some of that up and down? Shall I come out?
Yes, I would like to, because it was on my list of essential things that I wanted to sort of bring into the conversation today, which is about the devaluation of the feminine. And I think that this is a massive trauma that's been perpetrated on human beings, really. And it's high time now that we started to really not just embrace, but really welcome the feminine energy back into human experience, or into more than human experience, into the experience of being in the world. But this devaluation of the feminine, and I've done quite a bit of reading about where it might have started in Western society, but you know, it's something that we will now devalue the feminine at our peril, I think. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And so I suppose those drawings for me are about, you know, this kind of like almost unconscious model that, you know, that there's something about the masculine energy which takes us up into the heavens where God lives, you know. And that's been such a, you know, I think, you know, the patriarchal system within which we're now operating is really spent. I really think there has to be another way of problem solving and of connecting and of doing human business. And I think the power and of patriarchy now, it's so, it can, you know, it's brought us to our knees. And I'm not blaming men for that, but what I'm saying is that the real healing here has got to be to realign the feminine and masculine energies together. That's what and so I suppose those pictures for me are about that, really. I don't know what you think, Jane, or other people think, indeed.
I absolutely agree about the need for the feminine to be valued now. I think it's inevitable.
It is.
And the world needs the other energy. And I think all that we are learning in the world at the moment is that there are resources that we need to now make available. And it's not just coming from the masculine anymore. It has to be a feminine energy that will heal the world now. So that really touches what I've been focusing on too.
Mm-hmm.
However you understand feminine energy, because, you know, it's not just about roots, it's not just about the deep and the dark. There's something about the embracing that is feminine energy too.
Absolutely. 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 Says Joe.
I would like to say that there's something about seeing the roots in the deep and the dark. It feels to me like we're missing something there. It feels deep and dark to us, but I bet it doesn't feel deep and dark to the cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see the boundary of where the floor is because of how we're built in our perception. But if you're a cabbage, it's just how the world is. You know? So there's a lot to be said for questioning our perception and the barriers that we perceive, that they may only be barriers for us.
Thank you. And Zara, you were wanting to speak as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about Hindu goddesses, in particular Kali, and how the complexities of Kali, and how she's a warrior and actually someone that you would go to worship when you know, no one else is gunning for you and you need the job doing. You know, you need someone to come in and sever those heads and sort everyone out, and then she's a kind of fantastical kind of hit squad, but she's very much aligned with creation, and that's also about destruction. You know, the two are together, and I guess I kind of feel I just want to bring that in because the feminine can often kind of conjure up quite simplistic notions of creation. You know, not that messiness, Jane, that you were talking about in relation to your drawing. You know, creation it's mucky.
It is. I love how you said that, mucky. And Kali's energy is fierce.
Yeah.
It's like the fierce mother animal protecting her cubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, she'd chop heads off for their sake, kind of fierce energy.
But absolutely driven by love. It's
Yes.
all about love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
At least that's my understanding.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was just thinking about what's the masculine fierceness driven by?
Well, I think it has to be love as well, doesn't it, Adrienne? I think so.
I don't think so.
But
like it to be, but I think it is more about driven by the need to be powerful.
But why? Yeah, I agree. But why? I was just wondering why that's happened. Is it maybe just love of power? Might be love of country and love of family, and thinking that that's what you have to do. That's how you have to be in the world. But yeah,
I don't know, but it feels like a different drive.
I wonder about the interconnectedness of, I mean, it's almost like, what do you call them, you know, sort of interlocking rackets. We've kind of slipped into as men and women, different from the masculine and feminine energies, you know. And I guess Geoff and I are both quite deeply influenced by Jungian thinking, and that animus anima that is in me and the animus anima in you, Geoff, that kind of the masculine and feminine reconciling in me is something about what might go on in the world. But there's something about the ways in which the feminine principle, the negative of the feminine principle has interlocked with the negative of the masculine principle sometimes.
Yeah.
And what we are looking at, and I think there are people out there talking about it as a great turning at the minute, where we're coming into a non-dual understanding of the positive and negative aspects of the feminine both being acknowledged, the positive and negative aspects of the masculine both being acknowledged, and that releasing a huge amount of energy. And I mean, for me, in TA terms, that's about the functional ego state model, which I would always sort of draw in rectangles, but the kind of the recognition of the controlling parent, the structuring parent, has both positive and negative aspects. The nurturing parent has both positive and negative aspects. And in my thinking about that as a theoretical model, what I think about is those aspects have an intrapsychic reality, so they have a sense of what's going on in me between the negative and positive aspects of the structuring critical parent, and what's going on in me in the negative and positive aspects of the nurturing parent. If I can make that a bit more accessible, I've got a vicious Vera in me. She gives me such a hard time. She swishes her skirts. When I'm frightened, when my sort of somatic child is terrified, as in preparing for the oral, vicious Vera, the negative aspect of that structuring critical controlling parent, gets herself out and gives me a really hard time. The positive aspect that would structure my life, get me focused, settle down, organize things, isn't in evidence. So there's a kind of positive negative. The nurturing, kind, warm, nurturing side becomes molly schmolly. She just indulges. She's marshmallowing to the point of slobbery. So there's something about the both-handness, the integrating of all those aspects. And I don't know whether that makes any sense. Geoff, have I gone off on one, or does that make sense?
No, I love the way you brought the TA in, actually, because you know that animus anima stuff and the negative nurturing and negative controlling and positive. I think that was really helpful.
I notice we've got someone else who's joined us. It says
hello,
Vivian, and I just wanted to say welcome.
Hi, Vivian.
See, can you turn your camera off and we say hello, or is that, I don't know whether that's going to work. Turn your camera on rather, and we'll wait to see if you can come in. But you're welcome anyway. I think we probably need a leg stretch or a bio break or whatever people need, or a shake or a digest what's been said. What do you reckon, Geoff? We've been at it almost an hour. Jo needs some more jasmine tea. What do you think? Anything you want to just touch on before we go to the break?
Well, I don't think there is at this moment. I'm really challenged. I'm really challenged by this idea. But I suppose what I just want to say is that it's such a challenge to embrace the non-dual and to embrace all of it as part of our creative endeavors. You know, it's like there is this inevitable desire to want to split, and I'd love to talk more about that as we move on.
I wonder whether, can I indulge myself and read the Claire Dubois poem?
Yeah, please do.
As a blessing going into the break. So we will take 10 minutes away from the screen after this poem, and the 10 minutes away from the screen can be whatever you need it to be, and then we'll come back. So you get a screen break. Excuse me. I'll share the text for those. You might want to close your eyes and listen. Some people prefer to read. So let me just share screen. There's a particular, so this writer, Claire Dubois, she's the founder of an organization called Tree Sisters, which has brothers in it too. She challenges us. She's passionate about trees, and she says, we have as a human species become a plunderer species over the years. We've become a plunderer species. What do we need to do to become a restorer species? And she thinks about that intrapsychically, interpersonally, and globally. So she thinks about that inside myself. In what ways do I plunder my own being? And how do I restore my own being? How do I plunder in my relationships? How do I restore relationships? How do I plunder in relation to the world? And how do I restore? So I want to read this poem. And as I say, if you want to close your eyes, do. So it's a poem by Claire Dubois, who's the founder of Tree Sisters. It's called You. Inside you, in the places where whispers carry memories, where you hold your breath, turn away, and believe yourself less, there is a truth. A truth as gentle as a melody, as limitless as the sky, as honest as a mountain lake. No push, no need to try. A truth that shimmers with the light of you, the bright of you, the irrepressible delight of you, the take my breath away flight of you, the I will not go silently into the night of you, the oh my God, just feel the might of you, the break me wide open sight of you. When at last you have embraced all of you, accepted both the day and the night of you, the luminescent, spontaneous grace of you, I want you to know I'm in awe of you, all of you, every microcosmic, wild, orgasmic inch of you, every wild, unfettered gesture of alive of you. Thank you. Thank you for you.
Thank you.
What a treat to read that. So it's about 11:05. How about we just take a break till 15:15?
Till 15:15. Perfect.
Okay.
We're off.
Shall I go back to the PowerPoint, or
yes,
or do you want to give people a chance to reflect a little bit on where we've got to?
Yes, anybody wants to say anything before we move on, please do. Otherwise, we'll bash on. But yeah, is there anything people would like to contribute at this stage? This is us learning together, isn't it? We're holding space for.
Incredibly powerful. Thank you. It was extraordinary and challenging, and my brain cell feels overloaded, completely challenged. you know, but it was great because there'll be a lot of food for thought. A lot.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I think the drawing of the brassicas really kind of brought home, and the two-way physis, that was really significant. And I'm interpreting the up and down as not necessarily pejorative or a value judgment in any way, just a necessary counterbalance in order to create stability.
Absolutely.
Kind of thinking in engineering terms, that counterbalance, that necessary need for roots. And it just links. Yesterday, after we were outside, following the opening keynote, just plodding around in that 15-minute break with my shoes off on the grass. My reflections on that came in the form of kind of noted that it was a bit of a crazy drawing, really, with lots of words that came up, but I did it in a sort of a way whereby I was thinking of the three colours of the base, the brown and at base level, and the green in the middle, and then the blue at the top, and the kind of the relevance. It's just, it never ceases to amaze me how you can immerse yourself in this, and threads that come from seemingly, it's that interconnectedness, isn't it? Just blows my mind.
It blows your mind.
It does blow your mind. You're right. Yeah.
That's what it's meant. What it's meant to.
I was thinking, since I think it was Zara who referenced my drowning man diagram. Do you remember that old thing? Was it you, Zara? I think it was you.
I think it was Krina.
Was it Krina?
No, yeah, it was Krina.
Yeah. Anyway, I was thinking that it's time to redraw that diagram. I've recently saw that wonderful film, My Octopus Teacher.
Yes. Oh,
a beautiful film, but about, you know, the magical world under the sea, forest under the sea, that is part of our richness, as well as what is above.
there was love down there.
Pardon?
There was love down there.
There was love down there, and sharks. Sharks and love.
Extraordinary.
And this is what was extraordinary, because, you know, it's like what pulls us down into the deep. Forget about injunctions and things like that, but what pulls us down into the deep is also a force that we need to go with in order to connect with the love underneath. Anyway, so this is what I'm thinking, that
lovely, yeah,
a new diagram needs to be put out there. Thank you, Krina, for referencing it.
I'm thinking about the horizontality as well, because of course roots grow that way as well, as down, don't they?
Do.
And that's how we then connect. And if I think about how trees communicate with one another, one of the ways that they communicate is through their roots.
It is. It is.
Thank you.
Shall we move it on a bit, because this is so relevant, really?
Yeah, let me pull up one or two more slides, if I can do that. I'm so proud of my technical abilities here, I can't tell you. Right,
there we go.
Current slide, let's try. There we go. So we've got to here. And one of the people who gave some thought to this kind of connectivity and the place of spirituality in TA was Muriel James. So just wanting to kind of not say, you know, that this is all new, that there's a good history of Muriel James thinking about the connectivity, spirituality. I attended a one-day workshop with Ken Mellor on physis at the Burn, which was really useful a few years ago. There's material, and Petruska Clarkson was interested in physis, obviously, and thereby hangs a long story and a long tail. But just saying, there are things in our tradition within TA that we can turn towards. Jeff, do you want to pick up here? Just thinking about.
Okay.
Next.
So I suppose if we thought about physis or yes, all the terms that we used from the various wisdom traditions and faith paths and from contemporary psychotherapy, it is a connecting force. I don't know, when I first met physis, I assumed that there was something a bit individualistic about it. Because I would, because that's where my mind was. But it is actually all living things being connected, all the spaces, all the material between us, that we are at our core one global living organism, alive, pulsing and breathing. And I want to say at this point that there is I can't tell you how much material there is out there now on this, that consciousness, which I think is another good word, like physis, is not something which comes from our brain. It's something in which we reside. And this is something that the ancients knew. But with our materialistic, consumeristic, scientific mindset, we have forgotten that we are one living organism, and that consciousness is not something that is a product of the brain. I don't know if any of you are fans of Buddha at the gas pump, but it's a great series if you're interested in spirituality and listening to different perspectives. But what Rick Archer is always saying, the host, is that the brain is like a television or a radio. It's a transmitter. It can filter out consciousness, because actually, if consciousness was really available to us, it would blow our brains out. It's a bit like in the Bhagavad Gita when I think Arjuna asked Krishna, can I see you? Can I see all of you? And Krishna says, I think you wouldn't be able to bear it. There's something about that. Consciousness is where we live. Our brains can filter out aspects of consciousness in order to enable us to survive. But if we can take that leap from thinking that consciousness is not a product of our brains, and actually there is so much evidence out there to suggest this now. I really, for those who are interested in the science of this, which I'm very interested in the science of it, but we live within consciousness. It's not the other way around. It's not, the world is not dead. The world is a pulsating, living, breathing organism. That's what I wanted to say. And the Thich Nhat Hanh, who is somebody I had the privilege of meeting once, he said our lack of love for the earth is a manifestation of the lack of love we have for ourselves. So this sense that we reside within consciousness, and that consciousness is essentially benign, essentially loving, and that it's something that we have been disconnected and separated from by a whole range of experiences, which are interpersonal and cultural and biological, international, a whole range of disconnections that we've had to manage and deal with. But I think that we have a yearning, I'll speak for myself, this yearning for the homecoming, and that the homecoming is really based in self-love and love of others, and in this belief that consciousness is where we reside, and not a place not something that we produce from our brains. And if you're interested in any reading around this, I'm happy to put up a couple of books that you might be really interested in reading, because there is now so much evidence that in fact, the founder of quantum theory, Planck, Otto Planck, wasn't it? he said that consciousness is the stuff of the universe. The universe is conscious, the whole thing. This is a hard scientist. This is not some religious person. This is a hard scientist. I know, Jane, you get irritated with me, don't you, when I go on about science?
I think it's an example of the privileging and hierarchy of epistemology, that, you know, if you know it scientifically, then it's real and true and strong and good and big and up there. And if you know it wisely, then it's kind of not so privileged. So we have a bit of a banter around that, don't we?
I tell you what I've been thinking, though. I think the world would benefit from belief and knowing that there was some scientific evidence for this.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, I just think I don't want to be uncritical about that narrative about if science says it, then it must be true.
No, absolutely.
Science is provisional. It's a constant. The scientific method is constant experimentation and uncertainty in order to come to some tentative partial conclusions, and then we revisit all over again. If I understand science, that's what I think science is doing. So yeah, but I can see that there's a world that might believe that narrative more than the so-called woo-woo narrative, as it were, of spirituality.
Yes.
So, yeah, I can get that.
Yeah.
And Eric Byrne, from his wisdom, you know, he was saying we can't prove in that scientific way that physis exists, but everything we do seems to be a bit easier if we assume that it does. It is a kind of faith, as somebody mentioned earlier. You know, how does this link to spirituality? That's without the life force, we don't live. It's the essence of us. And those questions about what fosters connection and what disrupts connection, what fosters life force energy, whether it's up or down, which both equally valid, what fosters life energy and what disrupts life energy. And we would argue that one of the things that disrupts life energy is trauma, neurobiological overload, and trauma being not, you know, as I'm sure many of you are aware, not the event, but how's the event being held, witnessed, processed, digested, or are we in an overload which continues to do the duality and the splitting? Because the duality and the splitting, which are a really common and familiar part of human brain functioning, can be what lead us to forget who we are, to forget the essential beingness and breath and okayness. And then something about how that relates to hope. Because actually, if we trust physis, then there's some hope in here. There's a quotation from Cynthia Bourgeot. When Geoff was off on his retreat with the person,
Miranda
McPherson, who then you went to the One Spirit training, I was on retreat with Cynthia Bourgeot, who's an American priest in the Anglican Church. And so we both came back from our retreats very fired up. So this is something Cynthia Bourgeot says about hope, which I think you'll agree ties in with what we've been saying about physis. Hope's home is at the innermost point in us and in all things. It is a quality of aliveness. It doesn't come at the end as a feeling that results from a happy outcome. Rather, hope lies at the beginning as a pulse of truth that sends us forth. I wanted to highlight that in bold. A pulse of truth that sends us forth. When our innermost being is attuned to this pulse, it will send us forth in hope, regardless of the physical circumstances of our lives. Hope fills us with the strength to stay present, to abide in the flow of mercy, no matter what outer storms assail us. It is entered always and only through surrender, that is, through the willingness to let go of everything we are presently clinging to. And yet when we enter it, it somehow enters us and fills us with its own life, a quiet strength beyond anything we have ever known. I think as I revisit that quotation today, Geoff, one of the things that's come to me there is how we can't do that on behalf of someone else in a way. We can only really do it, yeah, on behalf of ourselves and for the sake of something broader. You can't tell someone, you know, you have to surrender, you have to have hope. That becomes abusive and a mismatch of power. We had a couple of inquiry prompts now to kind of pick up the life force image before we go on to intuition, but I'm also aware of the time, and so anything we're going to leave physis behind, although it will inform the next two sections. Anything before we leave physis and turn our attention towards intuition? Okay, so shall I pull up the slides a bit?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. All right, here we go. So, no, I'm going to have to go back out and in again. I'm learning. It wouldn't move on then, so I'll have to go back in.
Yeah, I know it's a pain. That I get that you get this. You keep pushing the button and it won't move.
Now I need to go back. Oh,
you need to surrender.
I do, Adrienne. How right you are. So I think
that's one of the lovely phrases that I got from Miranda McPherson was, "You are not the doer." That you surrender to something, and I kind of get it now. It's hard, isn't it, when you feel like you've been trying to be in control your whole life, that you have to surrender to something else.
Yeah.
It's
so I'm now surrendering to PowerPoint again.
No, that didn't look like surrender on your face.
It was so right. From current slide. Now let's try. Hooray!
There you go.
So you might go away and think a bit about what ways does or doesn't the concept of life force, physis, resonate for you, and what might the place of physis be in your professional and personal dialogues as we've been exploring it. Intuition. I think, Zara, it was you who mentioned the early articles that Byrne published on intuition. And I remember getting very excited when my supervisor told me about that. Yay! That sense of knowing something without quite knowing how we know it. There's a deep kind of gut feeling. You know it. You couldn't explain to anyone how you know it, but you know it. And Eric Byrne tells wonderful stories about how when he was assessing soldiers in the US Army, he had whatever it was, 90 seconds per person, thousands of them. Intuitively, he knew them. He knew what their job was. He could guess. Was it guessing? Was it intuition? What was it? He kind of had a sense, and he, being Eric Byrne, he conducted a scientific experiment, checking out, if I do that by gut feeling, by intuition, what's my accuracy rate? And if I do it by some kind of measurable, cognitive, processed assessment procedure, what's my accuracy record? And I can't remember the details of the figure because I have a brain that doesn't do details, but there was a substantial difference, and it was a higher accuracy rate if he trusted his gut, his intuition. And it went lower if he involved the brain, which was a slower processing modality. So it was a staggering piece of self-research and reflective inquiry, we could call it probably in our current world. Intuition often involves some of that kind of what sometimes gets called right brain stuff, you know, imagination, art, picture, song, poem, phrase, something that's not in the conscious memory, but surfaces, a bit like those of you who were in at the beginning. Adrienne suddenly remembered a poorly foot. I know, something surfaces out of nowhere. I didn't know that was in there. And intuition raises profound questions about epistemology, which is the posh way of asking, how do we know what we know? And it raises questions about hermeneutics, which is the posh way of asking, how do we understand and interpret what we know? So there's a sense of, yeah, this being a very alive inquiry for Eric Byrne. And him talking about the importance of intuition in the physician, because he was medically trained, as we know. And thinking about that, if you don't know it, Dan Siegel, who has done a lot of work on what they call interpersonal neurobiology, he has a book called The Mindful Therapist, and it could be called The Mindful Clinician. And it's really the insightful clinician, the intuitive clinician, the insightful therapist, the intuitive therapist. He refers to fostering mind sight. And I guess what Geoff and I have talked about over the last couple of years is the ways in which intuition is a kind of subtle, nuanced language of interconnectivity, perhaps connecting maybe the unconscious to the unconscious. Geoff, do you want to respond?
Well, what I wanted to, yes, I did, because, you know, for so long I've kind of like been thinking about how does it happen that when we sit with another human being, or when we sit in groups, that we are able to experience something of their internal world in our own? And it's just talked about as transference or countertransference or games or whatever, symbiosis, whatever we want to call it. But by what process can I experience your despair or your split off parts? You know, we talk about rackets, don't we? And we say that when somebody's in an inauthentic feeling, the therapist picks up the authentic feeling. And so, and sometimes that, you know, that informs something of what's going on for the client. But it's such an extraordinary thing that can happen, don't you think?
Absolutely.
That we pick up what's going on, or sometimes we do. We're not 100% right, but we can pick up what's going on in the mind of another just by being in the same space. I think that's quite extraordinary, and I think something we take for granted, a bit like switching the light on. But it's a miracle that we can pick up what's going on in somebody else's mind.
It is.
Or in their unconscious, or, you know, what are the authentic feelings behind the substitute feelings? You know, it's quite remarkable, really. And
it occurs to me how exquisitely kind of precious that is, and how it is handled with kind of a degree of restraint and kid gloves. I mean, that's why we have supervision in a way. It's like kind of, it's not something to be bandied about somehow. There's something very, yeah, precious in a good sense of that wisdom, and investigating and interrogating what's mine, what's yours, what's ours, what's co-created. Who am I for you? Who are you for me? That's all going on intuitively and under the surface, isn't it, I guess? And those transferential dynamics are there in play. Yeah. I guess the answer to your question, Geoff, about how is, Dan Siegel would say, interpersonal neurobiology and some of the stuff around Stephen Porges and the polyvagal stuff. There are again some scientific kind of explorations of mirror neurons and the way our autonomic nervous systems kind of connect outside our awareness and outside our thinking brains. And it's a somatic connection often, bodily. But it is time to pause, because we've had a race through intuition, and again we've got a couple of inquiry prompts about resonances. But let's, if it's okay with people, we'll stay in the big group and have the conversation in the big group. Yeah. So any responses, questions, comments, thoughts? What's arisen for you, Kathy?
Yeah, I'm as I'm listening to you, I'm reflecting on a group that I'm in. It's a trans. What are we? It's a family constellations. You know,
yes.
And I love it, and fascinated by
Extraordinary.
how I can pick up something that's from somebody else's past, you know, an ancestor, and I feel something. And I'm just fascinated by it. And a bit like you were saying before, I've got no words to describe it because it is just a felt experience. I say just as if that's a discount. It is. It is a felt experience, and yet sometimes words come. And I've experienced it myself, that I've had people who are representatives for me in my story, and they have said things that an ancestor has actually said to me. And I'm kind of like, how on earth did you know to say that? How on earth did you know that that's what they would say? If that makes sense. And I'm gobsmacked by it, really.
The first time I did that, Kathy, I was at a TA conference in Germany, and I forget the name of the woman who ran it, but somebody chose a group to be members of her family. And she said to one participant, she said, perhaps you could come and be my brother. And she brought him into the group, at which point he started to, but he didn't scream, but he just shouted, I can't be here, I can't be here. And he ran out of the group. What she hadn't told the man was that her brother had committed suicide. Absolutely extraordinary stuff there. How on earth did that person know? I mean, just it's mind-blowing, really mind-blowing. Talk about interconnectivity and you linking with other people's pasts. And I mean, wow. But of course, within this field of consciousness, it all makes complete sense.
Yeah, I'm a great fan of Jung's collective unconscious. That's always
yeah.
How do we know what we know? And
yeah, absolutely.
how is it a 3-year-old knows how to play on a mobile phone or a computer?
Yeah. So one of the things that I experience, because I'm really with you, Kathy, on that, I just feel mind blown sometimes by the evidence of interconnectivity and the, you know, that you do get in the family constellations, and that's wonderful. I know when I'm running groups and in the experience of being in a group, that it is an experience of interconnectivity at a very profound level. And I think that's what makes it so therapeutic. I wish we did a lot more now in TA. We've gone to this one-to-one as if that's interconnectivity and the relationship. And it really isn't. There's something else that happens when we are in the field with others, with other consciousnesses, in dynamically, that opens out this, consciousness, as you're calling it, connectivity. But one of the things that I found a bit jarring in what you said was when you talked about it as transferential dynamics. And I thought to myself, don't do that. Don't put the transference pathology, because it's often used as a diagnosis, onto something as miraculous.
Yes, exactly. But I suppose, just to clarify, what I meant was that we're given these labels.
Yes, but they're not
to describe something quite extraordinary. And it reminds, I don't know, was it Krishnamurti who said, once you tell a child a bird is a bird, they'll never see a bird again.
That's right. Once you say,
and so once you say transference, you've reduced it to something which seems just normal and ordinary, when in fact it is. You know, we're not at variance there. So I was using it as a kind of label, in a sense, for describing something which is really almost indescribable. Yeah, I'm with you there.
The phrase that comes to my mind as I listen to Kathy and to Adrian and to what you just said then, Geoff, is something about there comes a point when I bow before the mystery of all this. There's only so far I can go with the knowing or the understanding. And then, I mean, it's as part of my tradition, in a sense, to reach a point of I bow before the mystery here. This is beyond where I can go with my comprehension, and that's true for me with what goes under the heading transferential dynamics, whether that's my transferring things from my past and experience onto some of you transferring some of those things onto me, that the constellating of something from my past, your past, our past, collective past, whatever we call it. I bow before the mystery of that, and yeah, so there's something about that in there. But thank you. Yeah, what a rich conversation. Zara, you're
yeah, I just want to say, I mean, as a baby in TA, I find labels can be quite helpful as long as I consider them as light nets, you know, so they don't contain something in absolute terms. They've got they're like webs in a way, but they're really helpful in the way that I've got a dedicated yoga practice, and there's something about rolling my mat out and having this place where I can kind of lay myself out in these shapes and forms and feelings, and then roll it back up. There's something about, I think, the safety really in a label initially, where you can kind of draw things out, and then as we see fit, then maybe we can practice outside of the mat and, you know, get down in a different kind of way, a different kind of relationship with earth. But I think they do have their place as long as they're not heavy and too locating.
mm-hmm.
Yes, I think we need.
I just want to say, I want to attend to that need that I have.
Yeah.
We need to carry it lightly, don't we?
Yeah.
We need to let the theory hold us, not dominate us, to support us, to know what we already know. It's amazing. You can run a 101 and all these people will say, oh God, that was so amazing. And I think, yeah, because you know all this, it's in you. And what we're doing is we're trying to offer people a way of validating and describing the indescribable in some ways, isn't it? But it's like we have this knowledge inside of our bodies, I think.
And we, you know, we're talking about the power of language, and actually for some of us, labels can really connect us and ground us in, and then we can go away and we can kind of pick them apart. But I think if we're talking about connectivity, then language is an important means of doing that, as well as we honor the difference, and then kind of needs to be folded into.
Yeah. And language gives us a frame, in a sense, within which to see some things, doesn't it? And labels give us a frame sometimes. Thank you. And
some of this stuff is almost beyond description, isn't it?
Yeah.
As well, as you say, bowing to the mystery.
Yeah. And we've a section on autonomy with awareness and intimacy and spontaneity. Do we want a leg stretch before we get into that, Geoff, or how are you feeling?
I'm okay to go on, but let's just have a show of hands if you want to carry on, or if you want another little rest.
So carry on, hands up. Okay,
good.
We've been asked if
but I just thought that was a very important point you had on one of those slides, and it was something that came from Martin Wells, who some of you may have met yesterday when he talked. He didn't talk about it, but it emerged in one of his groups that intuition is the language of interconnectivity, and it's very subtle. And some of the ways I think that, well, I'll call it spirit, the divine, whatever you want to call it, speaks to us is very subtle. It's not loud, it's not brash. It's very subtle, and we have to be really tuned in to be able to recognize it and notice. But there's that part of us, isn't there, this, I suppose, the self, as Jung called it, that's always been there, that witness to knowing, that's always accompanied us through life, and that has nudged us in the right directions, and something really powerful but very subtle about that part of us that that's made that's helped us to make all the big decisions that we've made. And yeah,
there's a lovely phrase in the Claire Dubois poem where whispers carry memories.
Yeah.
That phrase.
Mm.
Whispers carry memories. Just if we may, picking up what Adrienne was saying about group, Geoff and I have run 2 6-week groups recently, a couple of hours each, and it's been such a privilege and such a pleasure. And they were kind of exploratory groups, but on the back of that, we have decided that we're going to offer a co-led, co-run, co-facilitated, co-held, I prefer held, co-held therapy group together from October for a year. And just be really interesting to see what unfolds in that, and the dynamics and the interpersonal interplay there. So you ready to go into autonomy, or do you want to say anything else, Geoff, or anyone else want to pick anything else up before we head into autonomy?
I don't think so. No, I'm all right. I'm all right to go ahead, I think, really.
Okay. Let's see now, just if I go back into PowerPoint first. Forgive me while I just manage my tech briefly. Talk amongst yourselves, or Geoff, you say something while
I was just saying, I think when Adrienne was talking about groups, and before I started my training, actually, I was a participant, and then I was trained as a facilitator with the Kubler-Ross Foundation, and she used to run enormous groups. And I think that those groups were safe places for people to really rage. I think it's a sadness that there aren't many places that we can really rage and make a noise and make a mess and get all snotty and hot. I think it's a sadness. But anyway, these retreats that she ran, which were for people who were close to death, either working with or partnering or being close to death yourself. And for 4 days, people would be in that deep pain and rage and grief. And what emerged out of this was the most extraordinary connection and love and celebration and connectedness that was, you loved everybody. And I think what I was told was that was just kind of like a manipulation, and it's not. It's actually how we are. And there are very few spaces. I mean, like, she was one of the people who had the sort of the courage, I suppose, to create spaces where people can really go into their pain and come out the other, know that they can survive and come out the other side, and absolutely connect in love with the people around them. And so I bought into the idea that somehow this was just an aberration. And now I realize it wasn't an aberration at all. It is how we truly are. And we're not allowed to do that in this culture, are we? I was listening to a woman the other day. She said she got so much rage about her marriage. And she said, where can I put it? And I was giving her sort of a few ideas about, well, art and writing and drawing and maybe making a noise in your car and all that. But I do think there are a very few places where people can really let rip into their grief and know that it's survivable and come out the other side. That's what I wanted to say. And in some ways, Geoff, I wonder, are you talking there as well about letting go safely into the depths of that experiential feeling is possible when there's an enlightened witness or a group of enlightened witnesses? It's that Alice Miller thing of being seen and held in that without somebody trying to rush to make it better, or just real holding of that. And do you remember that we did a course recently, didn't we? And one of the participants said, shame dies when stories are told in safe places. And that was a quote from Anne Voskamp. And I think that, some of those workshops, and I'm sure you know, therapy intensives and therapy marathons can sometimes take people to those places. You know, if they're long enough and safe enough and contained enough, then
Yeah.
we know that that this is possible. But there are so few opportunities for this now. I know Adrienne offers these things, but I just wish there was a lot more of it, because there's something about the talking which doesn't quite cut it, really.
Yeah, you have to have a bit of snot.
This is about the heart and the body being involved in the story.
Yeah. So forgive me for, in some ways I wish Geoff had been on the screen fully rather than my screen share, but I was worried I'd lose it. So yeah, so you're right to come into the autonomy bit.
Yeah.
Just a definition that, about being one's own person, autonomous, kind of self-governing in a way. And this is what I was talking about earlier about auto self, and nomos is the kind of law, regulation, custom governing behavior, and thinking about self and sameness and otherness all being part of our inquiries. And an inquiry in groups, what's me, what's you, where are we the same, where are we different, honouring of that.
So is that when, I talked earlier about, did I talk about Ken Wilber's 3 types of, where you talked about egocentric, ethnocentric and world-centric? Is that similar?
I think it is, but I think you could do egocentric, ethnocentric and world-centric with sameness as your lens, or with difference as your lens.
Right.
And we need both, maybe. I don't know. But that's a bit of conversation to continue, maybe. Somebody was coming in. Was that you, Adrienne?
No, I just said yes.
Yes. So Ken Wilber was who Geoff was referencing there, and that sense of the growing of how do we turn inwards, outwards, and have sameness and difference. I think those are the things that are in that. And how big is I guess what I hear Ken Wilber saying there, when it goes self, effectively tribe, and then the whole, it's like, how big are our points of reference? Self, family, group, nation, world, global. How big are those points of reference, maybe? Just Eric Byrne, as I said at the end of that last slide, the 3 kind of conditions in a way relating to autonomy: awareness, spontaneity, intimacy, almost like the necessary conditions for adult ego state. Offering availability to connect with self and other in the here and now. I was and Adrienne was there as well. Robin Hobbs did a really interesting workshop yesterday morning about the phenomenology of the adult ego state, where he was exploring some of this. But so what does it mean? Awareness. So the presence, the being, the noticing, attunement to self and other, sensory attunement, somatic attunement, being aware. An awareness of impact on self, others, and the planet. Intention isn't the same as impact, as we know. I can intend all sorts of things, but I can have an impact I don't expect to have. A sense of awe, that bowing before the mystery, is an aspect of awareness, I think. It's bigger than this, it's bigger than me, my mind is blown. And a gratitude as a kind of feature. And awareness that there's much in experience that's outside, beyond, beneath, above conscious cognitive reach. So, and then that sense of, as we develop our awareness, it increases our capacity to live ethically. I mean, within our clinical frames, the taking our work to supervision, because we don't know what we don't know. We bring in another person to help us expand a bit of our awareness. We don't know what we're unaware of. We don't know what our unconscious biases are. That's why they're unconscious biases. That's why we get in dialogue with another. And that increases our capacity to live ethically, not just within a code of ethics as practitioners and professionals, but ethically as a species on the planet, like Claire Dubois says. How can we become restorers rather than plunderers? By growing our awareness, by looking things in the face, by opening our eyes, she would argue. Do you want to say anything about awareness, Geoff? And
well, when you talked about Claire Dubois as well, I mean, one of the things that I've been really wrestling with lately is, you know, knowing at some level that I am part of the plunderer species. You know, how do I live with that? That's been such a challenge for me. It's like I can't suddenly, well, I don't think I can suddenly go and grow my own vegetables and become self-sufficient. And, you know, there's something about the pain of recognizing my part in the plundering process. And that's a big burden to carry.
Yeah, that we are implicit, we are complicit in the brokenness, as well as have the potential to be complicit in the repair. Yeah. I remember years ago reading a book, James Allison, I think the author was, called The Crucified is No Stranger. And it's from the Christian tradition, and a book of wisdom about the importance of knowing ourselves as both crucifier and crucified. Yes. We don't occupy a kind of moral high ground where we, and I guess that speaks to drama triangle stuff about, we're both, I am victim and I am persecutor and I am rescuer. And if I may, just because my brain's gone there, but in terms of the family constellations, but Hellinger, the founder of that kind of movement of way of thinking, very interesting Roman Catholic priest by background who left the priesthood because he said the Christian perspective suggests that there is a saviour, a rescuer in the person of Christ. And actually there is no saviour. We all have to work out our own salvation through our turning towards ourselves and our story and our constellating. And I'm quite challenged by that and fascinated by it, and fascinated by the kind of rescuer dynamics in the Christian tradition. And there's a wasp just come in, so I may need rescuing. Anyway, yeah, slightly going off on one, but can you hear there's something about allowing the awareness of I guess within the Christian language, I am a sinful human being as well as a saint. I am both and, neither nor, you know, not minimizing the impact I can have for good and for ill in and out of awareness. Big stuff. And shall I come out of the share before we go on to, or should we do intimacy and then come out of the share? Let's do that.
Shall we stay? Let's just have a little bit of a process around awareness, because there's just so much in there, and I don't want. It's hard to do justice to it, really. But let's just have a little process around that. How does it resonate with you?
Prina's put her hand up. Yeah.
I want to say before it goes out of my brain, and I've gone on to something else, but you know, I have this overwhelming feeling of helplessness about this, because for instance, in a personal sense, I crave nature, animals, trees, and I resent anyone walking in the same wood as me. I resent all these houses being built. I move to get away from everything. There's more and more houses and houses creeping closer and closer. Cars everywhere. I drive. I have a big house for one person and 2 dogs, so I'm a hypocrite here, but it just feels so overpoweringly, you know, like how do you, you know, get there when it's like this need for everything to work together, and you feel like people don't, so you want to give up. And like you said earlier about, you know, it's too much actually to be conscious about everything is too much. So I don't know. Am I making sense? I don't know. It's just
something I was talking about the other day, Karina, in my spiritual direction at One Spirit, and I was talking about this very thing, and she said, this is something for you to pray on because it's too big to carry. I was so moved by that. It's too big to carry, and it's like there is a helplessness. Sorry?
And yet we're saying that we need to, because we
need to, and I suppose we do what we can. We do our little bit, don't we? We do what's possible, knowing that we are part of a system which is problematic, to say the least. But I think, yeah, there's something about how do we forgive ourselves and not become complacent or passive or detached, you know. It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge, and we can never really avoid that challenge. I think it's something that we have to live with.
Is forgiveness necessary? Is forgiveness necessary?
Compassion, then.
Compassion is different, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was really struck that you used the word forgiveness, and I was thinking that I think I've gone to therapy over many years, times, partly to learn more about how to love myself, as you said earlier, but also to learn about how to forgive myself and to forgive the world for disappointing me in some way, and to forgive God for not being the rescuer that I want God to have been. Or so there is something about, because if I can't forgive myself, that's the place where I fall into despair. I heard in Karina's comment the kind of slightly despairing energy of I am complicit, and I recognize that, but then what am I supposed to do about, you know, it's like it is too big. And when I'm stuck in that energy of, I don't know, the not having forgiven myself for being involved, and then I can't go anywhere with it. And
doesn't forgiveness invite a power dynamic rather than an interconnectedness? You know, somebody has to be the forgiver, whether it's part of yourself forgiving another part of yourself, or looking for forgiveness from some higher being or authority. And I think that gets in the way. It does for me. It's like it invites me to be a forgiver or a forgiven. And that feels like a one up, one down. And I like the compassion. I like the we-ness of this rather than the I forgive you. You know, we are in this together. There is every single one of us is a plunderer. And, you know, by being at a workshop like this, even, we are part of a restoration of something. So there are many ways of being a restorer.
Yes.
We're not going to get forgiven for being a plunderer because that's going to go on. It's part of our condition.
I think when I talked about forgiveness, I was talking about that forgiving self. I was born into a system that I had no control or power over. I imbibed it. I acted it out of unawareness, lack of consciousness. I suffered a lot as a result of it. And I want to forgive the younger part of myself for not knowing. That's really what I'm talking about. But I hear you. There's all sorts of potential splitting within that. So because I'm reading this wonderful book at the moment by this woman called Sabina Selassie, and it's called You Belong, and it's talked about spirituality and anti-racism. And she said, my nemesis, because my nemesis was Donald Trump, you see, but hers was George Bush when he went to war in Iraq. And she said, and I hated him so much. I hated everything he stood for. She said, but I meditated in it. I meditated and I meditated and I meditated. And eventually I got to the place where I could say, had I been born into that womb, from that womb, into that world, into that family, into that school, into that university, into that culture, who am I to say that I could have done any better than he did? And there was something about her being able to say that if I was him, I would have done it. And it was almost like a very sort of powerful realization of her connection to Bush, the man she hated and who was probably a war criminal. But it was about, yeah, if I'd been born into that life, I would have done the same. How could I not? It's very, very deep, very meaningful, but very hard to get there, I think. Very hard to get there.
And Zara, yeah.
I'm thinking, Karina, about dosing and resourcing, and I'm thinking about that mat again and going on to that when I have the energy to focus and engage with that part of me, that dialogue. And then when I'm starting to tire, I say my namastes and I come off the mat. And sometimes I can practice for a long time, other times less so. But there's something about that commitment to engaging in the dialogue and then honouring the need to come away. And that feels, because what I'm hearing or sensing also is a kind of the tiredness of carrying that weight, you know, the loneliness perhaps in carrying that weight, and maybe committing to that engagement, but equally committing to time out. Boundaries, really, I suppose. I'm kind of talking about here, maybe something to consider and bring in. I don't know, but it certainly helps me.
Yeah, I need to find something, because, you know, if I see another bobble hat in the woods, I will go mad. It's just like wanting peace and wanting to find, you know, what it was like when I was a child. Even in London, you could go to the park and you could be free and it was quiet, and now it just feels very invasive. And it's not my world, but I'm acting like, you know, I've got a special right to the nature and no one else should be there. So it's very unkind. But, and it is hard for me to, I feel very angry, and I'm going to stay angry in a way, because I do feel like Jane and I often talk about anger. I'm always angry and she doesn't feel the anger. It's quite funny. And, you know, I'm angry that the world has become like it is, especially for nature. You know, it really, really saddens me deeply. And but you're right, and it's like, yeah, but thank you. I mean, I love what you just said, actually. There's something about containing it somehow. Yeah.
And I know sometimes, Karina, when I go into the park and I see litter in the park,
don't get me on that
and I want to go mad, you know, and then I think to myself, well, you've got a choice here, Geoff. You can pick it up and you'll feel better if you pick it up and leave the park looking nicer than when you entered it. But I also have to acknowledge, you know, the times where I've been a litterer, that I actually produce litter, and, you know, I might say, oh, well, I throw my litter away. I don't throw it into the street or onto the beach or whatever. But it's part of me. It is part of me. It's part of my history, you know, and so I immediately gonna go to bloody people throwing their litter, and then I try and come back to I am one of those people, you know, and it's not easy, but it's important. And I think then I'm gonna, if it's not too much, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to walk out in the park thinking, well, I left it a bit better than I found it. And actually, that's what I want to do in the world. Whether I will or not, I've no idea. That's not for me to judge. But yeah, just wanted to respond to that.
Very good.
The first instinct is always bloody kids.
Yeah, very good way to look at it, actually. And for me, it's builders that go to and just throw their rubbish out of the vans they drive in the countryside. And I'd want to kill them. And it's just the rage that comes up is horrendous. But you're right, I should pick it up, but I don't. So yeah, you're right. And that's the least one can do, is to kind of pick it up.
Because it's not meant to be patronizing, but I think when I was more of a litterer than I am now, I was just unconscious.
Right. How can they be unconscious? It's like, I just don't understand how they can be this unconscious of these things, or people. But you're right, people are.
I've been there.
Yeah, because we all have. Yeah.
Nice.
Just think what we're all unconscious of now.
Yes, exactly.
We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we're unconscious of now, do we, Joe? Yeah, exactly. And Denise, you wanted to come in, I think?
Yeah, I was just thinking that this was resonating a lot with me. Yesterday I was in a workshop and was talking about philosophy, and we was partnered up, and I think my tutors would say that my philosophy was around fairness and equality, but actually just recently I think I've moved away from that, or how I see it is, and I've got an acceptance about these things, you know, about the littering, that not everybody does it on purpose, you know, and I kind of, with my husband, I'm saying, I go out and litter pick, and he's like, what are you doing that for? You know, get the council to do that. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter, does it? I want to do it because I want to make the world a better place. But it was about this fairness. You know, it's not fair that the council doesn't do it and that the volunteers are doing it. But I don't see that at all. I just see that we're all in this together. And if someone's accidentally, you know, thought that they've put something in their pocket and it hasn't, it's gone on the floor, then we can all do our bit to help with that. So for me, as you're talking, it wasn't about forgiveness of that other or myself, it was about acceptance. I just wanted to say that.
Yes, no, it's very, very helpful and important. So it reminds me of a quote from Maya Angelou when she said, if they knew better, they'd do better. And I know that's a bit limited and it's a bit trite, but I do think it's worth thinking about that. If we knew better, we would do better. And maybe that's what we're here for. We're trying to do a bit better.
Trying to know a bit more and do a bit
more.
I heard acceptance and action. What you said, Denise.
Yes, and just going slightly off piece, Muriel, or not Muriel James, who is it that wrote that book on trauma? The famous. Sorry?
Babette Rothschild.
Well, that was one of them. No, I was just Judith Herman. Sorry, I was thinking about Judith Herman, and she said part of recovering from trauma is to be an activist. It's often part of the trauma recovery process, and I guess we're all activists. We're so uniquely placed. All of us sitting here today, so uniquely placed to be able to make a difference. It's such a privilege. It's such a privilege. And who's to judge whether our difference that we make is enough or not? But
and I heard what Zara said about dosing and titration. In a way, that's often in relation to trauma responses. And that's Babette Rothschild, I think, that she talks about titration and dosing. So in response to trauma, if you try to do too much too quickly, it's re-traumatizing. But you'd pace and you'd go forwards and backwards again. And brings me to my toy, which I like to bring out, which is this thing that shows that sort of the rhythms. I mean, the rhythms of dosing are like that. So how much can I bear, and when can't I bear it? And this rhythm is the rhythm of the heart, the pumping of blood. It's the rhythm of the lungs, the rhythm of breath. And we need this individually, we need it corporately, we need it globally. And we sometimes live here or there. And I'm kind of passionate about trying to find in myself more capacity for that. And I think of it as a kind of dosing, and yeah. So I love this little thing.
Where did you get it from? It's wonderful.
I discovered, I watched, there's a wonderful one called Irene Lyon, Lyon. I don't know if people know her, Canadian. She does videos about, she follows Peter Levine and people like that about somatic experiencing. And she was using one, and I thought, I need one of those.
Me too. What do you call it?
I don't know, I can't remember, but I found it on Amazon. Terrible. There's a complicit kind of, I think, what did I call it? I called it something like interconnecting stretchy toy, or I don't know what I called it, but it's interesting. I use it sometimes with clients, and when words don't work, they get what I'm trying to say about, you know, there's both and.
Wonderful image. So vibrant.
Given that I've got to do my CTA Viva online, I thought I might get
Joe is Googling it now, I bet.
Joe, you lovely man.
It's a Hoberman sphere.
How did you know that, lovely?
I Googled it.
It's in the chat, Adrienne.
It's in the chat.
Hoberman, Hoberman sphere. Huh, who knew? Well, anyway.
There you go. There you go.
It says
there is the power of interconnectivity, you see, right there.
Yeah. And it says something that words don't quite get, you know.
Yeah.
Something it's quite soothing. Anyway, I should put it away. But I might get it out in my CTA oral. What do you reckon, folks? Yeah.
No, you don't need. Just have it with you in your bag.
Yeah.
I can't go in person. I'll be there. I'll be online. So I thought I'd get it out. I'll get it out. I will. Anyway.
Okay. Are we moving on? I'm just mindful of time. And
yeah.
Just loving hanging out with everybody.
I've just got a thought about that thing we were talking about, awareness and acceptance, and it seems to me that there's a journey from awareness to acceptance, and that journey is where we leave behind judgment.
Where we what?
Where we leave behind judgment.
That's a really interesting comment, Joe. Yeah. So awareness, acceptance, leaving behind judgment. For a long time, I worked with a Jungian analyst, and one of his favorite sayings was, notice and be curious, don't judge. Notice and be curious, don't judge. And if you can't be curious, just notice. And stuff will start to shift. So we tend to notice, be curious, and judge. So if we can move the judgment out of the way, and then even the curiosity can come out of the way. And in response to something, I guess a couple of people have said, there's another Jungian I've done work with over the years who's been my spiritual director, and I remember saying to her in a very frustrated way, a bit like that frustration that Karina just articulated, you know, kind of, yeah, I know that, but how can I mend that? How can I do it? And she said, Jane, if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. And I could have strangled her. But I was working with her this week, and I was saying, I remember that, and I am so grateful, because actually if she engaged rescuing energy with me, if she told me what I ought to do, I'd have adapted to her rather than finding my own way through. And the journey of finding my own way through is the work, and the work is ongoing, and I have to do the work, you know. It's like she said, a good supervision inquiry is, am I doing this for me, for the client, or for the work? And it's not that, you know, we've got to get it right all the time, but
And what I want to say is that this work never ends.
No.
And I think that there is a temptation, certainly when people are working therapeutically for all manner of reasons, you know, whether it's to do with money or context, you know, whether they're working long-term or short-term and so on and so forth. It's like that the work somehow comes to an end, and it never does. This is our lifetime's work. And I just think to get on the train and to be on the journey is so exciting, and there's no destination. Well, the destination is death, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, that's one destination.
Yeah.
But I love the idea that I'm just on a journey, on an eternal journey. It's so liberating that there is no end to it. Yeah, I just wanted to put that in.
It's kind of liberating and terrifying at the same time, exciting, and you know, there's some stuff in there. I wonder what echoes it will have had for people. Let's do a little something on intimacy, and we'll have time at the end.
Yeah, let's
We're going
do
to
that.
finish a bit before 1 o'clock, so people aren't right up against their next thing. But let's just get ourselves onto something about intimacy. That kind of connectedness and acceptance, not requiring change. There's an intimacy with ourselves, intimacy with another allows you can be who you are, how you are. I love going back to I'm okay, you're okay dynamics, the moment by moment attention to that. When I notice myself either slipping towards I'm not okay, or I notice myself pushing you or the other towards not okayness. Oh, noticing, being curious, accepting, aware, as opposed to judging. Oh, it's bad because I'm going to a not okay place. How interesting. I wonder what prompted that. That kind of intimacy that happens in groups, in interpersonal relationships, in working relationships. And it does require that appreciation of difference as well as the connectedness, and safe enough to be vulnerable and to be utterly oneself, really. And it's interesting in the light of the conversation around compassion and forgiveness, because intimacy leads to compassionate problem solving, we said, and an emotional connectivity. And the really corny thing, that intimacy is allowing into me, see, I let you in. I let you connect a little. And we had another slide on intimacy, Geoff. Shall I go there, or would you like to talk to this one?
Sure.
No, carry on. So that sort of, love of self, self-compassion, not the kind of superficial self-centered, rather narcissistic self-love that the kind of consumerist culture can encourage us to engage in, but rather a kind of self-love that, and Geoff's very eloquent on this, some of you will have heard him before speak about this, and he has done earlier today, the kind of self-love that arises out of a genuine grieving for what's been lost on the journey. Intimacy is a kind of homecoming. And so that's our next project, isn't it? Our 6-week course. Our next one is called Grief and Growth. Yeah. Grief and Growth is our next 6 weeks. And also we've been talking about, with our unusual combination of experiences with Geoff's work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and my work as a hospice chaplain, working close to those who are close to death, we wondered about offering perhaps a day workshop on journeying with those close to death. But we will see what unfolds. And here we've come back to the masculine and the feminine. Yeah. This is the internal intimacy and the reconciliation of the masculine and feminine within us all. And the past messages and responses, which can be at war with one another, as we know, whether it's impasses or relational units, or that kind of stuckness that can happen between the past messages and past experiences and responses. And I suppose the little bit I'll say about the transformational object. Bolas talks about how what we carry is this hunger for transformation. It's almost like it's embodied in the fairy tales. It's embodied in films and music and art and so on and so forth.
sometimes this fantasy of a moment beyond which everything will be transformed and everything will be changed. And I don't know if you remember, Jane, but when I was doing the third year, I used to show that Susan Boyle video,
Yes.
where she walked onto the stage, a complete, like they thought she was an absolute joke.
Mm.
And in the 3 minutes that she was on the stage, everything changed. And that video went viral. And I think it went viral because you saw in 3 minutes someone whose life was going to be utterly transformed. And it's like a lottery win, that we have this fantasy of winning the lottery. People love to talk about what they do if they won the lottery. And I think it's a problem, this transformational fantasy, if you like. And there's something that the real transformation comes from being in the present and being in the moment and really savoring the moment. And that the real transformation is, it's about presence. It's about coming into the here and now, that I am transformed if I can go out and walk by the sea, or if I can really taste the coffee, or if I can really love another human being deeply. You know, I am transformed in the moment by that experience. But I think that part of the culture we live in gets us hooked onto, it will be all right when I've got that car or that house or that money, or when I've got that job, or when I've got that relationship. And it's a complete betrayal of the moment in some ways.
Yeah.
And he talks about it as a futile search for a future fantasy.
Yeah.
But that we need to love ourselves now in the present.
And loving ourselves now in the present isn't just savouring the taste of the coffee and enjoying the beach. It's also being present to the grief and pain. You know, in that non-dual way. It's not prettified. That presence is it's raw. It has some pain in it as well as the joy. It's allowing them both in. That's the kind of unconditional love that says, I'm here, whatever. I'm present to myself and all my experience. I do remember the Susan Boyle video very powerfully, and it's worth people having a look just to see. There's that kind of, again, what decisions do we make about the other and about difference, and how do they get transformed? And there's something in there as well. So, yeah. Do you want to? I've got the Cynthia Bourgeois.
Oh yes, yes.
It goes across 2 pages. It's your beloved quote. Do you want to?
Do you mind? Shall I read it now?
Yeah, do. And
okay.
Then we'll be just do that, and then because then we'll be at the end of intimacy, and then we've got a couple of slides on spontaneity. So. And
then we can have a spontaneous ending.
Indeed.
So this is a quote from Cynthia Bourgeois. It's a book called The Wisdom Jesus. So this is what she has to say, and I'd love to know your response to this, actually. So yes, we come into this world as a body, but is that a punishment? I believe not. I believe it is a sacrament. To quote the famous Sufi text, I was a hidden treasure, and I loved to be known, and so I created the creation in order to be known. And in this earth realm, by its very dense nature, by its very dualistic, binary, jagged-edged nature, this human experience becomes specifically the dimension to express certain aspects of the being of the divine that can only be expressed in these boundaried conditions. It shows us what love is like in a certain terribly particular and intense way. It accentuates those dimensions of divine love in which love becomes costly, and therefore precious. And so the very hard edges that we experience as constraints are in fact the opportunity to show forth some of the exquisite dimensions of the nature of love that can only be manifested within an incarnation. Since love requires your heart being broken, we begin to see such qualities as steadfastness, tenderness, commitment, forbearance, fidelity, courage, and selflessness. These beautiful, subtle savors of what love is like have no real context in a realm where there's no edges and boundaries, when all just flows. But when you run up against the hard edges and have to stand in love anyway, then what comes forth is a most precious nectar of the quality of the divine being. As I have said sometimes, I don't mean this as a joke, the most profound product of this world is tears. And I don't mean that to be morbid. I mean to rather say that tears express our vulnerability. When we can stand having our heart broken and still love, and from our tears flows out a sweetness, a warm-heartedness to the divine. This has been known in our traditions as divine mercy or divine compassion. This is the realm, I believe, in which this mercy, this compassion, is most deeply, harrowingly, excruciatingly, and beautifully released. That's our business down here. That's what we're up to.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Extraordinary articulation of what it means to be incarnate, in a way, enfleshed with edges. Extraordinary woman. Thanks, Geoff. You read it so beautifully. You moved me to tears. Beautiful. And we will have some space to talk for a bit. So I'm aware that we're not going to be able to do justice to Sabina Selassie, the quotation that's coming up later. So I don't know, where do you want to go? Should we just do a tiny bit on spontaneity and then the quotation from Martin?
Yes, yes. And I can say a tiny bit about Sabina, that the important bit I can say before we end. Okay. Just a few lines, yeah.
So in thinking about spontaneity, Geoff and I have a real commitment to the kind of unstructured group opportunities, because I think that's, yeah, that's where spontaneity can happen more. And PowerPoint is a bit not useful for spontaneity, but it gives us a structure and a frame, as we were talking about earlier in some words. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. Growth, freedom about responding as opposed to just reacting. If there's a brief pause, however brief, between stimulus and response, there's a chance to react in a different way with a full response. Embracing the unknown, not trapped in what ought to be or what we think should be, living into what is in the moment. Script-free transaction with life, living relationship with the here and now from adult, full of potential, full of energy, full of dynamic engagement. And Martin Wells, in his little book, Sitting in the Stillness, says, in the early days, I used to think that therapy necessarily involved change and personal development, that there was something wrong that needed to be fixed. Looking back, I think this might have reinforced the notion of a fundamental flaw, a fundamental not okayness, perhaps, the need for self-improvement and a search for a resolution, that kind of fantasy that Geoff was talking about, the Bolas fantasy. I no longer think, says Martin, there is a fundamental flaw in our essential being, but rather a fundamental perfection. If we start from a position of something wrong, one down, not okayness, then all our attempts to change will confirm this belief, and all our steps towards self-improvement are in fact steps away from who we are, away from our true nature. So yeah, witnessing self, other and the world in awareness, with intimacy, and from an unknown and open place of spontaneity. That's an invitation. And the You Belong book that Geoff was talking about. Geoff, do you want to say a word about Sabina?
Oh, well, no, I'm not going to do this. This is a meditation on, it's a meditation, and we don't have time to do this. I'm
going to stop the share.
Okay.
Well, I'm actually, just before I stop the share, we are just thinking about, we've got a new website, very baby embryonic website in spiritar.info, where Geoff and I are thinking about psychotherapy and spirituality together.
Yes, I just want to, you're going to forgive me if I read this, aren't you?
I am.
Okay, so this is a bit of Sabina Selassie, and I think it's quite a fitting place to kind of draw to a close, but Sabina talks about epistemicide. I thought, oh, what's that? And so she goes on to say, epistemicide is the killing of knowledge. It refers to the wiping out of ancient ways of knowing. There was a rationalist scientific paradigm within European Enlightenment that spread from the hard sciences to the social sciences and into the humanities. This worldview rendered non-scientific knowledge systems as invalid. She says, I believe epistemicide is the primary reason that we as moderns have lost our sense of belonging. In the process of modernization, we have come to believe that anything that is not provable through scientific method must be impossible. We have dismissed ancient ways of knowing because they seem irrational or naive. We have placed our faith only in scientific materialism, even though its certainties are continually unraveled.
And that beautiful quotation is partly the conversation you and I had earlier about science proving consciousness.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm.
And dear friends, we're coming towards the end. It's 12:44 by mine. So I wonder if we'll stay till 1, but the input is finished. If you need to get away, stretch your legs, have something to eat. But if you want a bit more conversation, we're here. So thank you for your attention, for co-creating a learning and growing space. It's been
great to have a small group like this for 3 hours. It's been so beautiful, so rich. Thank you.
And I'm curious about the ripples that might go on for all of you in different ways. I'd love to hear.
I need to go quite quickly, so I'm going to say thank you. I have a family crisis going on at the moment, and this has given me the wisdom to deal with it. I have a phone call that's coming up in the lunch hour that will be very important. And it feels like this has been such a profound gift. And by the way, I have now redrawn the Drowning Man diagram. Watch this space. I did it while something was emerging in this process.
Wow.
And so this has felt very, very rich, very profound. I have been so grateful for your presence.
Thank you, Adrienne. And we're grateful for yours as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go well. Farewell.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
say thank you very much. I'm going now. It was really nice to have seen you all, and that was very powerful. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Karina.
Thank you. Bye. Farewell.
I'll go next, as I'd like to go and stretch my legs and have a bit of time in the garden before the round 2. Thank you so much. I feel really enlivened and rich and full of possibility, and it's just been really lovely to sit by your trees. Thank you. Take care. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Namaste.
Bye.
I'll go next because I also need to go because I'm running a workshop in a bit, and I need to be in my room apparently for 1 o'clock, so I should go. And I just want to say thank you, and yeah, there aren't really words to describe how I'm feeling right now, other than slightly jumbled up, slightly curious, well, always curious, and I think what I've been hearing today, a lot of it is music to my ears. It's like, oh, hurrah. Some of the stuff we talked about, you talked about, I've heard before, other stuff I haven't. So, and I love that poem, Jane, that you read at the beginning, the You poem. So I've already downloaded that one. So thank you very much for that. And I love that sphere as well, that Hoberman sphere, and the pulsating nature, and it just says so much, doesn't it, without any words. So thank you both very, very much, and I look forward to more in due course.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Farewell.
Great to see you.
Bye, Kathy.
And hope your work, blessings on your workshop as you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's on track. Well, it's on loss actually, but I'm calling it transformational loss because I've put the stages of transformational learning to loss, not in the sense of tying it up with a little bow and making it all whatever, but it's about the phases of loss, and basically it's not the tasks, it's not the modern stuff, it's something different, but it's, anyway, I won't go into that now.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you.
Farewell.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm happy to sort of share what I took from it, really. Feels big, it feels stimulating in the best kind of way. Really interested in your dialogue about science and spirituality and where that meets and what that's about, and as ever it kind of stimulates more questions than it gives answers, which is always a good thing. So I just scribbled down as I was kind of playing with that what was coming up for me, and I'm curious about whether the reluctance to acknowledge the existence of the things that we can't see but we know, and the need to prove it by science, is a manifestation of our need to control the environment and our search for certainty, and a protection against the all-pervasive knowledge that we can't know what force is necessary to allow us to exist, nor when that force will be withdrawn. So it's quite sort of existential stuff. We don't know what it is that's keeping us alive. I mean, we know the nuts and bolts of it, but that physis, a kind of an accident of birth, and that will end at some point. So it kind of links onto some quite big stuff for me. And I think as well that towards the end, talking about acceptance, and there's been a little bit of a reframe there. I'm very early in my my experience, and within that experience, we're taught to think about the change cure process from a theoretical point of view, and often clients come with an idea of what they want to change about their life, what change would look like. That's the kind of viewpoint we're encouraged. And there's been a bit of a shift there, because I'm seeing that the role of acceptance in growth rather than change.
Absolutely.
And that change shouldn't really be the destination in itself. It may be a byproduct, but actually.
So yeah, it feels like some big shifts. So thank you. It's been
Thank
really,
you.
really interesting workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you. You may find Martin's book, Sitting in the Stillness, a useful thing to read alongside the Cure narratives. Farewell.
I just want to say thank you. Yeah, I've really, really enjoyed this last few hours together with everybody. And I felt like I belonged, so that's good for me. So yeah, I just want to, I'm a reflector, so I will definitely be reflecting on these few hours and what we've talked about and what you've, you know, evoked in me. So thank you, and thank you everybody.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you.
Farewell.
I need to make a move because I know my son has come home from football, so before he crashes in, I need to just say goodbye. But there's just something about that line between stimulus and response. There is a space, and so something about the rhythm of these few hours. That's just that in itself just feels very nourishing for me. It's something for me to reflect on. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I want to take away and make my own meaning from. So thank you. That was a wonderful few hours. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Debbie. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So this is Joe checking out. I'd like to say thank you both. I feel like really enjoyable, and actually I've got a couple of questions, but I found your email addresses on that last slide, so yeah, you don't get away that easily.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send a couple of questions. I've really enjoyed it. I get a sense that it vaguely reminds me of doing the TA 101, that there's so much interesting stuff in here to explore. How will I ever get my head around it all? And yet we progress and we do get our head around things and they become clearer. And as you say, Geoff, it's always a journey and it goes on endlessly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's where the fun lies.
Thanks, Joe.
So thanks, folks. I'm out.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
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 I'm the last one. I was
Yes,
the last
Vivian,
one.
you are.
I was the last one to arrive. I'm the last one to leave. Thank you so much. I arrived late, and it's weird when you were talking. Well, it's not weird, but you were talking about when I arrived, how the unconscious, and someone was saying, how did I know? When someone talks to you and you think, oh, but I know this. And that's what I've been feeling the last 3 hours, thinking I must log on to this. I know it's going on and I must log on. And I was rushing around and I was thinking, I'm not going to log on and feel ungrounded and hair is everywhere and barely washed and dressed. So I thought I'd take my time. And as I logged on, there was a tree. And the first motion I was thinking about was to be grounded. And then you just start to talk about all these emotions I've been feeling the whole morning. And I was sitting there thinking, how did they know? So yeah, so thank you. And Jane was telling me I can watch the catch up, I guess.
I believe you, Carter, are going to offer the recording, so we'll see. But that's what they said they would do.
Yeah, okay. And do I need to leave my email to you on the chat, or I do what Joe was saying, I stalk you online and find you?
I think if you find us, you can email us and ask us questions. We have a new website, which is In Spirit TA at the end. So INSPIRITA.info, INFO.
.info.
And our email addresses are on.
Yeah.
I mean, you can contact us via that. Oh, thanks,
thank you,
Joe.
Joe.
Joe's popped it in the chat. Thanks, Joe.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
So thank you all.
Thank you.
Farewell.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye. Is that all right?